There was an influencer who became insanely popular. Everybody started following him.
Oh, who's this guy?
Then, one day, he stood up for something he believed in. People got angry.
Hey, we've all been there.
The establishment called him an extremist, said he shouldn't be allowed to share his views. They would stop at nothing to shut him up.
Wait, we've got to silence this guy. Who's with me? Count me in. How do you do, fellow kids? Let's silence some people.
So they did what they had to do. They nailed him to a cross.
Yo! So I found out about this huge Christian PR campaign called He Gets Us, trying to save Christianity's image, I guess. And while I was researching it for a video, I came across this ad and was like, we've got to talk about this. Was Jesus canceled? To me, it sounds like, yo, remember that time you said a racist comment at school? Or that time you harassed someone at work? Or that time you posted a weirdly transphobic rant on Facebook? Yeah, and remember you got a whole lot of criticism for it and people decided that your values didn't align with theirs? Yeah, remember that? The same thing happened to Jesus. Jesus was canceled too. And the fact that this ad used pictures from Black Lives Matter protests is so ridiculous because protesters weren't canceled by cops. Do you see how weird that sounds? It's like you're using this buzzword canceled in a really weird way. Here's another funny example.
So now here we are in another cycle of cancel culture, but this is nothing new. Cancel culture has been around since the beginning of time. Cain canceled Abel.
I never in my life did I ever think I'd hear the sentence, Cain canceled Abel.
We have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that were thrown into the fiery furnace.
Everyone knows I love me some Shadrach, Meshach, and Benny, but using the word canceling here is weird, right?
King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to cancel them, but there stood another in the midst of them, and he was as if the Son of God.
Yeah, and in the same way that God saved them from being canceled by Nebuchadnezzar, God wants to save you from being canceled by these Gen Z liberal SJWs, right?
And then they tried to cancel Jesus, but you can't cancel God.
So I just wrote a book called The God Who Riots, Taking Back the Radical Jesus. And I write about the suppression that Jesus experiences from the Roman government, which led to him being executed by Rome for the crime of sedition, and how the colonial Christian nationalism we see today looks a lot more like Rome and less like Jesus. Pre-order in the link below. So trust me, Jesus was not a victim of cancel culture. He was a victim of government suppression. The same type of government suppression that politicians like Lauren Boebert are perpetuating as they're passing anti-trans bills and rolling back LGBTQ rights and abortion rights and trying to stop schools from teaching a basic history of racism in the United States. But to her point, we've got to understand the difference between violence and people calling out violence. And when you call both of those things canceling, then you're blurring the lines, probably so you can silence the people calling out violence. When people with power and influence and wealth complain about cancel culture, we should consider if it's because they don't want you hearing some of the criticism that's coming from these cancel mobs. Let's take a moment to talk about what cancel culture actually is. Cancel culture has its origins in people, mostly black women, calling out their abusers and using social media to do it because, as we know, social media can be used as a digital megaphone that can reach the whole world. And so we were able to amplify people's stories that couldn't be heard before. That's one of the cool parts about social media. People who were previously silenced now have a better chance at being heard. So this is a huge part of the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. And today we're seeing it even play a huge part in a new labor movement as workers are able to connect and share their stories of common struggle as they're working at places like Amazon or Starbucks. And they're able to talk about how to unionize their workplaces. So the origins of what we call cancel culture is good, and it's awesome we live in an era where we want to hold powerful people accountable when they abuse and exploit others. But then of course we hear about cancel culture going too far. So with all this complaining about cancel culture over the last few years, I think so many problems have now been piled under the umbrella of so-called cancel culture. So now that the discourse is completely muddied in 2022, let's talk about some of these problems that people have. It's time to give some hot takes. First off, I hate when people say, you can't say anything these days. You literally can't say anything. You can't have an opinion anymore. It's just my opinion, bro. But apparently you can't even have those anymore. Especially from people who make some sort of art or entertainment. But I think a more truthful statement would be, you can't voice an opinion these days without experiencing feedback. Because the major difference these days is how art is distributed. Social media platforms have evolved over time to make our feeds overlap with other people's feeds, even if we're not following them. Because one of their primary motivations is keeping people scrolling and engaged. It's like, nope, don't leave yet. Look at this guy with the most unhinged opinion about Spanish colonization and the Minions language. So if you're a popular artist or entertainer and you're distributing your work on these platforms, then you're going to get a lot of feedback and naturally get a lot of negative feedback. People talk shit before, but now you're able to read a lot of it. And so that phenomenon isn't a problem with cancel culture. It's a problem with the way that social media platforms manipulate our behavior and making us experience way more feedback than humans were designed to withstand. So I'm just trying to take all this junk out of the discourse so we can address the problems that we actually have. Another problem people say they have with cancel culture is when a brand sponsors a creator or entertainer and then they see the negative feedback and pull their sponsorship. It's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Porky Jordy Vlogs, we gotta cancel the Taco Bell Mexican pizza promo. The kids found your tweets. You called someone a beaner. But that happens because the primary motive of these brands, like every company under capitalism, is profit. So when a client becomes a risk, they give their sponsorship to someone else who has a better chance at making them money. And when we have a problem with that phenomenon, that isn't a problem with cancel culture or with particular people with particular political opinions or with Gen Z or whatever. That's a problem with capitalism, specifically with the way that artists are monetized under capitalism. So it's like, yeah, let's talk about that problem. And lastly, when people talk about cancel culture, they may be referring to people who aren't popular artists or anything, but are just normal people who get fired from their job because someone recorded them doing or saying something problematic.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
But similarly, that phenomenon should be recognized as a problem with the totalitarian structure of nearly every workplace under capitalism, where the owner of a company can take away a worker's job for whatever reason they want, leaving them unable to make money and unable to survive. That's the problem here. So, the fact that we're seeing more calls for accountability and victims of abuse speaking up is good and shouldn't be equated with our problems with cancel culture. But when we do talk about those problems, I'm just saying, let's go deeper here. Our problem may not actually be Gen Z liberal SJWs taking away your freedom of speech or something. The real problem is with capitalism and its inherent totalitarian structure. And those in power who benefit from that structure, I'm sure are really happy that we're blaming each other for all these problems and getting distracted with all this cancel culture discourse. So again, Jesus wasn't canceled. He was suppressed and executed by the same type of powerful leaders who are complaining about cancel culture today. All right, so yeah, cancel me in the comments and make sure you go to the link below to read the introduction to my book right now and get a special video just for signing up to my mailing list. Pre-order that book. It's going to be great. And if you want to support me, go check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Thank you everyone who's already over there. I really appreciate the support. It helps a lot. So go consider becoming a patron. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.